Okay, cool. So Layer 2 Labs is this idea about a Bitcoin technology called Drive Chain. And could someone remind me how much time I have before I do Q&A?
Yes, yes. After your speech, you have 20 minutes Q&A.
Great.
And yeah, we can ask you some questions of Layer2 Labs and let our audience know more about Layer2 Labs. Yeah.
Okay, great. But how much time do you want me to speak for?
I think 50 minutes, it's depended by yourself. Yes, it's your freedom.
Okay, sorry, what did you say? What number was it again? You cut out a little.
15,
15
yeah.
minutes.
Okay, great. Cool. So I am a Bitcoin researcher and I wrote a lot about Bitcoin, quite a bit. And Adam Back linked to one of my posts a long time ago in December 2014, which was sort of my big break, so to speak. And this led eventually to me creating this company, Layer2 Labs, to help Bitcoin dominate the world. But between now and then, I give various technical talks about Bitcoin. I publish research. I publish many ideas, some of which people really like, some people don't like, some are controversial, some have become mainstream, some people still don't understand. But two of them became BIPs 300 and 301, and those became Drive Chain, which became part of why I started Layer2 Labs. And the idea behind BIP 300 is very bold. And I have some three favorite endorsements here, which is Adam Back saying that they would probably be cooler than Taproot, which is what Bitcoin spent the last 5 years working on. He said this on Baltic Honey Badger in front of everyone on stage, recorded. The creator of Nostr, the co-creator, really, he thinks that without Drive Chain, Bitcoin will basically collapse. So that's nice. And then Rene Picard, the author of Mastering Lightning, he said, we need your project, of course, for the obvious reasons. So I have quite a bit of an elite endorsement. If you go to, there's much more than 47 now. We keep adding to this list, but you can go to layer2labs.com/friends to get an idea of the scope of this idea. And my claim is that we don't have time to go into all these at all, but the idea is that this BIP 300 solves all Bitcoin's biggest problems. It's currently very fashionable for people to pretend like Bitcoin doesn't have any problems at all, but I think it actually has quite a few. These are all related to the inability for someone to make a change to the protocol. So if you want to change the protocol, it must be a hard fork or even a soft fork, and you can't really obtain either. So I claim it's going to be that we solve all these problems with zero risk to Bitcoin at all. So the idea is that, I mean, I'll get more into this in a moment, but the idea is that whatever type of protocol you want, if you want like a Filecoin or a Zcash or whatever, you can do that on top of Bitcoin, but there's only one coin. Only the orange coin is needed and the other coins are not needed. And so it's kind of a cool thing because we have competition on the right things. We have developers competing for users, but they don't compete for like marketing the coin. And I see it kind of like this. We're turning an old rotary phone into a new smartphone. It can still do everything that a phone can do, which is call someone from one house to another house. But it can also do many, many other things. And this is key because of the network effects of money. The more things you can use money for, the bigger it will be. People prefer to use the money that their friends are using. So it's also key because of what's called the universality of computation. Anything you can do, anything one device can do, another device could do. So the devices can all emulate each other, and that means that one of them will become all-purpose, or all of them will. And at that point, the only thing they will compete on is their network effect. Okay. So I think I'm going to just skip to this part and then I'll do this one here. I'll say, we have all these problems that I list, but one is called heterogeneity, which is that people are different and transactions are different. So you have this idea is that some people want to say, oh, Bitcoin does seem great, but can it do smart contracts? Or can it do, and can it do like a file storage, permanent file storage, which we might hear more about later today. But it's like, can we do all these things? And then normally you have to say blah, blah, blah. But then with this idea, you just say yes. And then, you have someone who they may have a fringe, they have a weird idea. Like this is the case where the idea is terrible. But even if the idea is good, you would still want to pick it up. So instead of having to go through the Bitcoin core development process, which is very, very slow and kind of terrible, you can just easily pick it up tomorrow. So something like 119, which people hated at first, and then they really hated it 2 years ago, but now they like it. So I'll skip this part because what I wanted to get to is this. You need different chains for different users. So like, but even within a user, they might spend part of their day in a certain mode. Like they might be buying coffee with, 99% of their activities might be just normal activities. And 1% may require some kind of extreme cypherpunk privacy, some political subversion or something like that. Now, it's not going to work at all if they use 99%. Every legitimate thing is paid for with, Venmo or WeChat Pay or whatever. That's no good because then there's no justification for, like then every illicit thing is paid for with crypto. So we needed to make it so that even the unstigmatized, even the dark transactions are in Bitcoin. So we basically need, what the irony is that if we want to have a decentralized, private, censorship-resistant Bitcoin, we need to have a centralized, non-private, highly difficult, expensive full node Bitcoin. But even within the same user, so not only are people different, but within a single day, a person's use case can change. And then the other thing, BIP 300 actually solves all these other things. It does. We can scale. We can achieve planetary scale the next day. We can copy the Zcash drive chain and have perfect privacy. There's no need to have a there's no need to have an altcoin ever to achieve a new feature. So this eliminates the excuse to have it. There's no real reason. But if we don't have something like this, if the world or Bitcoin doesn't have the ability to emulate any feature, then how can we tell people not to launch a new coin? Because they say they care a lot about whatever. They care about ring signatures, so they must be able to launch their thing. Yeah, with BIP 300, miners collect all the fees from all the chains for free in return for doing no additional work. And that's great because it's a lot easier to collect 10 cents from like 1 million transactions and get a huge amount of revenue from that than it is to collect a very high fee from a very small number of transactions. This idea also allows us to shrink L1 and freeze the spec, so it actually stops L1 from changing. And we can use Bitcoin for real world tasks. So like, I think Namecoin is big, which I call Bitnames when it's a sidechain. And I think prediction markets will be big. There's a lot of like media type things that I think Bitcoin will do. And then finally, the zero risk part is the key thing to explain. BIP 300 is an easy soft fork to add to Bitcoin, and it's easy to remove. So you add the soft fork, and you have a new Bitcoin core that's interoperable with the old one. But if you just take the old one, or if you take a brand new one, and then soft fork it, do exactly what you did before, a new soft fork that bans all these transactions, you just go back to the orange one that you started. So this is the big thing, and we can go into like a lot of these details, but that's the big picture overview. And it's 8:15 here, so we said 15 minutes. I am happy to continue to speak on all my little slides here, and all my little examples. And I have details of the BIP text. I think one thing that we should try to emphasize is, let's try to say one last thing. Where is it though? Oh yeah, here it is. So I'm not sure if I actually have time to make it in a short way, but the idea is that inputs, getting in is instant and always works, and from L1 to L2, but L2 is very slow. And this is designed to make it very, very auditable what is happening, so that it's clear to anyone if miners do the wrong thing in facilitating these withdrawals, that it was totally 100% intentional, and that they are pulling the plug on this idea. They are essentially putting us back, like I said, with this thing. They're essentially putting us back and deactivating the feature. So the feature is only live for as long as they do the right thing, and the right thing is very easy to measure. So that's some of my thoughts, and it's a complicated idea, unfortunately. I mean, it's very simple to me, but it's very easily misunderstood, I'm afraid. So I'm happy to take any questions or to continue to speak. So yeah, so LayerTwo Labs has been funding some of this development and funding this research. And we produce software. We have clones of the latest version of Ethereum, clones of the latest version of Zcash. We have clones of quite a few different chains, and we have some chains that we've written ourselves. We have a large block sidechain that's written from scratch in Rust. We have a Namecoin as a sidechain that we've rewritten from scratch in Rust. So we're doing quite a bit. And you can download all of that at drivechain.info/releases, or you can go to layer2labs.com also. That is, let's see this thing. That is around 15 minutes. So
Okay.
yes,
Thank you, Paul, for your such
thank
a
you.
brilliant speech. Are you finished or not?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think that is next will be the Q&A time. I think many people must have questions for you and LayerTwo Labs. I think Sam, Sam, are you there? Sam?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think Sam Williams. Yes, I think you could if you have any questions of LayerTwo Labs and Paul, and you could ask him, and I think you can do it at that event, because the event is freestyle. Yes, so let's begin.
Hey, well, hey,
Oh.
good to meet you. So I mean, I have a lot of personal questions. I think it's a very, very interesting project. We've been following DriveChain for a while.
Yeah.
But I'll ask the one that I think like everyone that comes across the design first has, and then maybe that gives you the opportunity to talk about it, which is what stops the sidechain operators, if that's what you guys call them. You call them sidechain still? Yeah. Running off with the money, right? So some tokens deposited, for, I don't know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever that is, Bithereum, and then the operators just decide to take the cash. And so I hear the argument that that's basically shutting down the sidechain, but obviously the users
they might want to shut it down. Yeah,
but the users of the sidechain would want it to be trustless, right? It would be
yes. Okay. The reason why I think I'm all for that. Okay, I wish that were possible, but back in 2015, I had a list of reasons why I thought that would never happen. And mostly the list has held up really, really well. So first of all, what just to answer the question, what does keep them what keeps them honest is that the sidechain operators are sort of It's really the miners who, they don't do the day-to-day, but since everything has to go, this is part of the, let me start over. This is the big picture reason, which is that 51% hash rate, they can censor any message they want from L1 at all, whenever they want. So in proof of work, you can never, they decide what makes it into the blockchain, because they're the ones who decide whether or not they saw something or whether or not they just never saw it. And the idea is the transaction fee keeps them honest. So since they can do that, they can also interfere with the L2. Because every L2, you have to join on L1 and then come back on L1. So what I took out a piece of paper to design this, I thought, what do we have, what kind of things do we have the power to change or maybe control? And which things are complete lost cause? And I kind of wrote this on my list, which is that the 51% are dishonest. You're kind of doomed anyway. And this has actually been borne out a lot more. For example, I was saying this about the Lightning Network in 2015, that miners can just steal from it. And people are like, what? But now people have come around to admitting that that is the case. And so, because in Lightning Network, they just censor the justice transaction. This is very easy. And Rene Picard, the guy who wrote Mastering Lightning, like I said, he's actually explained this in detail, like on mailing lists. And now yesterday, it's not a huge deal, but there's a Lightning attack that involves just the fees, bumping a fee above another fee, which you can see how that is actually just an imperfect version of just the miners just straight up, because the miners interpret the fee. So they could just say, well, we want this one to pay a higher fee. So the answer to the question is that the miners are the ones who get all of they're ultimately in control. 51% hash rate's ultimately in control at the end of the day, and they get all the money also. So just an L2, if you just look at like what fees or today, I don't know, it changes day by day, but on this day it was about 7 million for ETH. I think on the weekend it comes down. So it's 2 million today. So it's not a great day, but 2.3 on the average. So you say we're talking millions of dollars a day. Depends on the day, of course. But if that's the amount of money that's coming in, just the net present value of that is whatever this is, which is like, it's like 216 million per month on whatever day it was I did this research. And then at this NPV, net present value at 8%, that is but somewhere between $4 and $33 billion. So there's no guarantee that it actually worked, but if we had I say that's today's prices, that's 1.27 million BTC, and it's 227,000 BTC for 10 drive chains. And that's quite a bit, of course. This is comparable to what is in, like the Lightning Network only has 4,000 or 5,000 BTC in it, and Liquid only has a few thousand BTC in it. And I don't know exactly the number on what wrapped BTC is, but it's something like this number. And so the idea is the miners get a certain amount, but like the net present value sort of equalizes the things, but they get a certain amount of money by just keeping it going. A certain amount of money is constantly coming in. And then if they pull the plug on that, the value of other mining hardware would fall by $33 billion. So so it's a kind of a question of like, if more than this amount is deposited, then it would become insecure. Or if the fees, the expectation of the future fees falls, it will all become insecure. So it's all about this economics. But other than that, there really is nothing that stops them from taking the money. But that is what gives it the freedom to, because everything else has these big constraints. You have to be able to pull it to L1 in order to enforce it on L1, and including the ZK. So even if you have something like a ZK proof thing, I had considered that idea because it had already been invented in 2015. But I thought, well, ultimately, it doesn't actually make any difference, because first of all, you're going to have to get the prover on. This is a relatively minor thing, but it's actually insurmountable so far, which is you have to get the prover on L1. So you are forcing L1 to process everything, or for it to be possible to process everything. And there'd be so much bike shedding about like which algorithms to use, which prover to use, whatever. It would never. And I don't even know. I think that literally a betting man would say that it would be at least 5 years before, and even from today. So I was right to throw that idea away. But the bigger picture is that the miners could censor the L1 ZKP if they really wanted to. So if they're determined to steal, and it's all the money's in this one chain, and they can write some other version of the chain for free with merge mining or whatever it is, where they have the money and then publish it on L1, and then someone says, no, they have the ZK proof of that. Like that's not what happened. Because all that's necessary is that they own the money at some point in history on the L2. So even in the case with the ZK provers guaranteeing every single step, if they just temporarily become into ownership of the coins and then they sell them away and the equivalent of 6 confirmations happens, but it's before it checks in on L1, then they can check in on L1 with that and say that was the last block that ever was made. So I kind of punted on that. I said, look, there's no fixing that. And then I said, well, given I just assume that we have 51% honest hash rate, and I said, we'll shore it up as much as possible. So it was the delay and making there be only one withdrawal every 3 months and having it all be the same withdrawal for everyone. That lets us to, at least in the L2 sidechain software, you can publish the hash of this withdrawal everywhere. You can have everyone see it so that it's just in public. And it's very, very slow so that literally everyone will know that the withdrawal is wrong. So it's basically similar to like, you know, what is called weak subjectivity by Vitalik or something, where it's like and this is the type of thing that would work on L2, but it doesn't really work on L1, I think. But to some extent, it does work on L1 because Vitalik said we could push the envelope in this direction. And he was sort of right. He was sort of right about saying, well, you know, how do you find the hash of, you know, the correct Bitcoin software? How do you know when you download Bitcoin Core, you're doing something? So he was right that there was a little bit of glue there. And so I use a similar thing where I say, well, maybe this won't work, but it probably would because it's not. But yeah, like I'm not going to make any guarantee about this being the perfect idea, but actually as time has gone on, it looks better and better and better and better. And other things look worse and worse and worse and worse. I'll give you just one more example and then I'll stop talking. But the principle of it always being possible to drag the transaction from L2 to L1, that also I think is actually a dead idea because not everyone can use L1. So this is like a darling idea. I don't remember exactly what it's called, unilateral withdrawal or something, this principle. This is like a very important idea for Lightning and for Arc. And even when I was first shopping this idea around back in the day, they said, oh, people told me the sidechain should calculate how it would pay everyone off and give everyone those transactions. But that's also kind of, it's just not going to work because 8 billion people can't use L1. And therefore, if 8 billion people are on L2, they can't go from L2 to L1. So it's also insurmountable. If they would fit on L1, then, so of course we want to give everyone some way of coming back, but we can't actually give them we can't give it to them up front. We have to hope that the coins will further change hands on L2 before they come back to L1. So that, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that type of thing really requires it to be very loose. You can never have like a snapshot of L2 and then deploy it on L1 because the snapshot will never fit. So you have to hope that there's some people who are going around it who are on L2 who are saying, okay, I will consolidate all the coins into one output and then take it on. I'll be the one guy who does that. And so it needs to be more flexible. And another thing, I thought I said, the final thing just to mention is that when I get older, you know, as years have gone by, I can kind of compare it more to how does the actual financial system work. The actual financial system does not work like Lightning or Arc, where stuff is like over collateralized. There are some things like the repurchase agreements, which are like over collateralized lending. So, and those are trillions of dollars a day. So that's a lot. But in general, things work on credit. So they're under collateralized. In fact, they have almost zero collateral in the real world. So it just kind of makes me think that it's the wrong direction. Like with Arc is like Lightning Network or Arc, there's a coin backing each thing. Whereas there's coins in the sidechain. So the sidechain is like 100% backed. And then they kind of change hands. It's just a little bit looser. And I just kind of think, well, the real world is much looser than that. Or the real world at least has this huge spectrum of like extremely tight to extremely loose. you know, and most people, when you go and sit down at a restaurant and you start ordering, they have no idea if you have enough money to pay, you know, but it's just like, it's just looser in the real world, you know. You go to the dentist and then they invoice you, you know, people invoice you. They don't like, you don't like post 200% collateral most of the time. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts.
Right. Interesting. I mean, I have further questions, but
yeah.
Does anyone else from the audience want to
ask? I'm going to cut in line and ask a new question.
Yes, maybe I think many audience have many questions, but we have no time.
Oh, okay.
But our audience and our guests, maybe you can DM for each other and you can have further communication. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your excellent speech, and thank you for good questions. And next, maybe after Paul's speech, we will have another guest speaker from Arweave Eco. It's Sam. So Sam, so I think let us give the warm welcome to Sam Williams, founder of Arweave. And I think, Sam, you can share your screen, yes, to us.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Oh, no. Trying to share my screen is asking me to open system preferences. This has been a surprise. It says it wants me to quit and reopen. Okay, I will be back in just a moment. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay. Hey, Paul. I think that time you can maybe continue your points to our audience, because we are really interested.
Okay. Do you, well, maybe someone has a question if they have a, oh wait, no, Sam seems back.
Okay.
Oh, Sam, come back. Okay. You can share your screen.
Excellent. Okay. Does everyone see me and hear me all right? And my slides.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to speak here with members of the Bitcoin community as well as the Arweave community. Arweave is very much inspired, I think, by some of the ideas of Bitcoin. But we'll get into that in just a second. First, I want to say that while I was the person that founded Arweave, I only today speak for Forward Research, which is one of at least 8 other institutions that are all committed to pushing the adoption of Arweave. So we don't have an ecosystem as widely disparate as Bitcoin, but we have deliberately engineered this such that there are many different people running organizations that have many different voices about what the future of Arweave should look like. And so I'm happy to just represent one of those today. Okay, so what's the big idea here? Well, I think that when Bitcoin started, Satoshi, interestingly, before Bitcoin was used for the transfer of value, embedded a newspaper article headline said, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout of banks," for banks rather, in the first block of the Bitcoin network. And this is pretty interesting, because this, would you say, record of history, unlike any other record of history before it, was stored in, when I checked this yesterday, at least 16,000 places around the world in a cryptographically verifiable way without a single leader. And this is quite a compelling idea, because before this, if you wanted to create a sort of decentralized archive of any form, the appropriate way to do it was to try and use something like a distributed hash table. But the problem with the distributed hash table is that it has no incentives to replicate the data. So the data might be in the network somewhere, and there's mechanisms to try and find it if it is in the network. But if there are no incentives, then the access time on average in practice becomes many minutes. And so it's really not a fantastic mechanism for archiving data just from that point of view, but also fundamentally, if you don't pay people, they don't replicate the data. And what Bitcoin did here was created an incentive for people to replicate this record of history. And so that gives rise to an obvious idea, right? Which is, well, can we create a Library of Alexandria or an equivalent, a modern day equivalent inside a similar system, such that we can create records of history that are never forgotten? And why would that matter? Well, I think Orwell said it best: the person that controls the past, the person that controls the present controls the past. The person that controls the past controls the future. That is, if you are the person that has control over what people are thinking and talking about, then you can control their, what do you say, perception of their context, their history as a people, as a across the world. And as a consequence of controlling the way that they think about their history and the context in which they find themselves, you control how they act in the future. Well, a decentralized archive would have no centralized rulers, right? So nobody could have, what do you say, their finger on the scale of how people interpret history. And I think that this is an extremely powerful idea and one worth pursuing. And it's essentially what we started pursuing when we started Arweave. So the first thing we did when we looked at the structure of Bitcoin, well, actually, the first plans for Arweave when it started, it's called Archain at the time, were very, very, very basic. When we were first exploring this idea, it was like, well, what if we could just increase the size of Bitcoin blocks? It's like, and at the same time, minimize the size of archival records that we wanted to store. So we were thinking, could you take a web page, you could extract out the text from the web page, get that down to about 1 or 2 kilobytes, then, how many of those could be fit inside a Bitcoin block? Still not enough. So maybe you create larger blocks, and obviously larger blocks is centralization in a traditional blockchain system. But we looked at that direction, and then we looked deeper instead. And at the time, I was working on a PhD in distributed systems, operating system design, and so we had some background in this area and proof systems that were relevant. And eventually we ended up coming up with a design that has changed a few times and is now what we call succinct proofs of random access. So the broad principle is that instead of having a traditional mining system where you are guessing random nonces and then hashing them to check whether they satisfy a difficulty requirement, instead what we do is it's a little bit complicated, perhaps I won't discuss it all here. But essentially what we're doing is we're getting miners to replicate the data set and then stochastically checking the presence of that data set, while also checking or creating an incentive for replica completeness. So I mentioned the complexities of distributed hash table, how to describe them? Distributed hash table search time inefficiencies. And fundamentally, the reason that that's a problem is because if you were to try and solve a problem in a traditional distributed systems environment or computer science environment, actually in any form, the first thing you would do if faced with the task of how do I locate data or something like this, is you would try and make an efficient encoding of the data set. So a mapping of some sort, an index that will help you navigate the data set, typically arranged in some kind of tree structure. Well, the problem with a distributed hash table is because it has permissionless joining and leaving of the set of active nodes. You can't organize the data set in a particularly efficient way. And this leads to long access times. And so we're also thinking about this over the years with Arweave. How would we make it so that you can find all the pieces of data quickly without ending up in that same problem set? And we realized that what you can do is you can essentially incentivize miners to have access to the full data set. And then you can sort of punt the problem to them and basically say, well, look, if you can't access the full data set, then you can't mine efficiently. And so there's some complexities in this algorithm with Arweave 2.6, but it essentially says, look, you can mine if you just store random bits of data, but if you want to mine efficiently, you have to organize with your friends until you have a full replica of the data set. And then of course, if one miner can route from any byte in the network to any other byte, then when a user comes along and says, hey, do you have my data? They might say no, but they will know actually where to send them to. And so they can charge for that service of sending them to that piece of data if they so desire. Anyway, so we made it so that you can fit arbitrary amounts of data essentially on chain yes, inside a blockchain-like mining system. But that creates another problem, right? Which is, well, okay, now if you can, I mean, Bitcoin has this problem to some extent in a smaller way, this problem that you have an ever-growing ledger. Now you need something to pay for that. And Bitcoin basically says, well, if the block size is capped, then actually, while the data set may grow over time arbitrarily, it'll be capped in the amount to which it grows. So imagine that the max speed at which the Bitcoin blockchain could grow is, to make it simple to understand, 1 gigabyte per year, or one, let's say, terabyte, more reasonable, per year. Okay, well, in year 1, we might have 1 terabyte worth of data. And in year 2, we have 2 terabytes of data. So it's doubled in size. But by year 10 to year 11, it's actually only increased in size 10%, right? It's gone from 10 terabytes to 11 terabytes. So actually the proportionate increase in size of the Bitcoin blockchain is sort of declining over time as long as you're working at maximum capacity. And that's interesting because it interacts with the declining cost of storage. In fact, if the declining cost of storage in a given year is higher than that increase, then peculiarly the cost of storing the Bitcoin blockchain or ledger has decreased in the year, even though the ledger has increased in size. Well, Arweave takes this whole idea essentially a step further and says, okay, well, what if when you put data into the network, you pay for, say, 200 years worth of storage, enough to be the seed of an endowment. And then rather than taking that capital and hunting in the economy for yield with which to generate a return and to buy things as a traditional endowment works, what if we just sat on that capital? And then as the cost of storage declines over time, which is essentially a deflationary effect of technology, we can get access to the good that we need, which is storage, at a cheaper price. And so you can play this out and you say, okay, imagine static token prices for a moment. And of course, that doesn't happen in practice. They vary wildly, but which affects your endowment lifetime. But there's no way around that fundamentally. But so imagine for a moment that they were static. You essentially have this situation where, well, at the first year you put, or at moment 0, T0, you put 200 years worth of storage costs inside. At the end of the first year, you will have 199, right? Apart from, well, if the cost of storage has declined somewhat in the environment, there's a deflation of that value, in which case you might actually have more. And in the past, the declining cost of storage has been around 30% on average for the last 50 years. Now, it won't necessarily be that high for the very, very long term, but Arweave is essentially saying, well, if it's above 0.5%, then you should, at the end of the first year, have more storage purchasing power than you did at the start. It's essentially a storage endowment. So you match these two things together and you create a permanent data storage system inside a decentralized network. It's essentially like a blockchain. Okay, so we've been running the system in practice for 5 years at this point. It has stored, I think at this point, somewhere along the lines of 1.2 or 1.3, maybe somewhere between 1.15 and 1.3 billion pieces of information. Well, let's jump into what some of those things are. So the first use of the system that was an important record of history, I think, was from the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in, I believe this was December 2018, about 6 months after the network had started. There was an incident in the Sea of Azov near Ukraine and Russia, where essentially Russian troops had boarded a Ukrainian naval boat and taken some of the sailors captive. I believe they were released a few days later, but at the time this was a pretty serious escalation. And we managed to capture inside the system some of the earliest press releases about it. And they are records of history that are now stored in, at the current time, I think about 700 to 800 different places. And those are nodes that are online. If you think about the replicas of the Arweave dataset that are currently not online, it's many, many more. And so those are stored in so many places around the world, it would be realistically impossible for any one side of this conflict to destroy them, unless we had like a one world government. That's the one attack vector for Arweave we can't really get around. If everyone in the world is on one side of the political equation at some point, then there might be danger. But that has never happened before and doesn't look like it will happen for a very long time. So as long as there is multipolarity in the world, then this decentralized network can essentially sit between the content policies of both and would you say, expose a basket, a bundle of those content policies, right? The superset of them, which keeps the data set safe. And also caught at the same time was one of the, I think, the first English language article from a Russian news outlet, arguably propaganda outlet. Here it was Sputnik, which was stored inside the system. And this was pretty interesting because this was an article that said, it was essentially written in a quasi-pro-Ukrainian voice, which is peculiar, of course, because they came from the Russian government, and it was deleted 14 minutes later. But we have a copy of this, what the writers at Sputnik actually thought of this incident before they were told to evidently change the line to something more pro-Russian. And this is a record of history that, as Orwell described, couldn't be memory holed. There's no way to get rid of it now. Doesn't matter what the Russian government thinks, it's in so many places, just can't be destroyed. It's not just the Russian government, though. About a year later, I believe, September 15th, 2019, a year later, there was an incident where someone captured a press release about a sexual assault charge on a member of the military of Canada that was stored inside the system. And then a few days later, it was deleted because the charges have been dropped, although that doesn't change the history that very much the charges happened. But the Canadian government would like you to believe that that history does not exist, and yet it does exist inside Arweave. One of the elegant things here you can see is that this has been confirmed over 1 million times at this point. So just like the record of history that Satoshi put in the first block of Bitcoin, that is buried under a proof of work now. The same is true in Arweave. So if you were to try and rewrite history and somehow remove this, you would have to go back in time 1 million Arweave blocks and produce a huge amount of work in order to attempt to convince people that there was an alternate history. It's just not feasibly possible. More recently, about 77, I think, million pieces of data from the start of the Ukraine conflict were stored inside the Arweave network. Many of these have logs of history that I think both sides would potentially want to have forgotten, but the point is to create a neutral ledger that cannot be, what do you say, that neither side can dominate, a neutral ledger of history that is available for all people, or as many people as we can possibly make it, to see without changes being made. And most recently, there's a push in the Arweave ecosystem to store information out of the Israel-Palestine or Gaza conflict. Currently, they've stored 33,000 records. And one of the interesting things here is that after the archival efforts from the start of the war, in the second phase of the start of the war in Ukraine last year, there was a push to create a platform that would allow people in the Arweave community to collectively contribute Arweave tokens in order to archive this data. This essentially became something called Alex for Alexandria. And here, 11 people, members of the community have contributed 11 tokens, which sit in a pool, which an archival node essentially can go and take from. And so you can set up your own pool, and they can take from these community contributions and archive data from them. And so here they've stored 33,000 records of all sorts of things that are important for humanity not to forget. There's probably a couple of other things to go through, but we'll leave it there. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I think if anyone have questions, you can open your mic and ask Sam. Oh, it seems like you mute yourself, right?
Oh, my camera is doing something weird. Well, okay, I think it's a very interesting idea. The idea is not necessarily that, because like maybe only a few people, you mentioned that maybe a miner doesn't have the file, but they know where they know how to get to the file. But everyone is like sharing one library, like that image you had is like,
Yes, essentially one large
yes.
data set.
Yeah. And then what some people do, the Bitcoin culture, which does this terribly, because this is an annoying thing about Bitcoin, but it's it's a side story. But what Bitcoin thing would be to like put the hash of the data on with like the timestamp, and then have it yourself, and then give the whole thing, the whole bundle to someone. Say, listen, I prove that it's real. I prove that it really existed before this time.
Yeah, that's we think that's better than nothing. And there's certainly, we actually have like a version of that I think is a better evolution too. If you were to go that direction, obviously hashes are way smaller, so that saves money and makes it possible to do on chains that don't have arbitrary amounts of on-chain storage. But a sort of middle point is storing BitTorrent. Yeah, not quite the whole torrent file.
Like the info hash or something. Yeah.
Exactly, the info hash and related stuff, so that if it was available in a distributed network, you can get access to it. And so actually one of the first uses of Arweave was to upload all of the torrents from the Internet Archive. So you at least had censorship-resistant distributed access to that data, as well as verifiability that the data hasn't changed over time. Although BitTorrent, I think by default, still uses MD5 hashes, which is
That
not
is funny.
exactly.
It's a throwback to an earlier era.
Right,
Simpler
exactly.
time.
Yeah, simpler time.
The
Yeah,
internet was mostly text. I wish we
right.
could go back, honestly.
Interesting. Yes, but the idea of Arweave is to take that further and say, well, you should actually replicate all of the data if possible, because
Yeah.
one person being entrusted with the archival activities is obviously only going to last so long, right? They will eventually forget
Right.
or move on.
Could be like an Infura has the library, they sell access, then it's just the idea though. It's just a different format of the same idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, so if you're in Arweave land, would just be a gateway, right? And you can use gateways, and you can pay for better access via gateways and that kind of thing, for sure. And then we use BitTorrent like data sharing in the background. So you need access to the data, right, in order to mine. And so you do optimistic tit for tat, essentially, to replicate the data around in many places. You can also pay for access using this thing called P3, which essentially the PermaWeb payment protocol is more or less payment channels just for accessing chunks
Cool.
from the.
Very neat.
Thanks. All right, Carl. Any other questions, or are we?
Yeah, so any other questions? If not, we will go on. Hello. Okay. No, no one want to ask. But if you want to ask Sam and Paul, please DM them on Twitter. Yeah, you can find them anytime. So next, we will going to, I think, let us give the most warm welcome to I think is Andre Serrano from Stacks. Yes, and he's also OG from Bitcoin Eco. Yeah, so Andre, can you test your mic and share your screen? Okay.
Yeah. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sure. I'm sorry for the delay, but okay.
Yeah, no problem. Perfect. I'll go ahead and share my screen. But yeah, thanks for having me here today. My name is Andre Serrano. I'm the product lead at the Stacks Foundation. We're primarily focused on infrastructure and R&D on top of Bitcoin. Specifically, I'm building a protocol called SBDC, which is a decentralized way to move Bitcoin from the L1 onto the Stacks network. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that today.
Anyway.
I'm going to be sharing my screen now. Let's see. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Great. So the title of my talk today is called Growing the Bitcoin Economy, Building Bitcoin-Powered Applications Using SBDC. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I believe that Bitcoin is well positioned to be the foundation of this decentralized economy. And to begin my talk, I'd like to talk a little bit about the case for Bitcoin and why I believe that it is so well positioned for this use case. And first of all, Bitcoin provides ownership over your financial data. It allows anyone in the world to send and receive money without going through any sort of central counterparty. That means that nobody can be excluded from the network on the basis of their background alone. It is a censorship-resistant store of value, and Bitcoin really is for everyone. And it's also the chance to rebuild our financial system on a solid foundation through a system that is more secure, more resilient, and more transparent than fiat central banking. And for these reasons, Bitcoin represents hope. It really represents economic freedom and self-sovereignty for millions of people around the world through a currency that can't be confiscated or devalued. And for these reasons, and those are some of the reasons why it is well positioned to be the base layer of the digital economy. And to understand sort of where Bitcoin is headed, I'd like to talk a little bit about Bitcoin's history. So, the Bitcoin white paper first appeared in 2008. And by 2013, we started to see some of the first projects launching on Bitcoin. Mastercoin is an example of an early project. And then over the past, call it 5 years, we entered what is known as the digital gold era for Bitcoin, where Bitcoin really became a reserve asset, given its characteristics of being a form of sound money. However, I believe that Bitcoin is more than just a form of digital gold that really just kind of sits on your cold storage device without any sort of productive use cases to it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited. As of this year, we started to see so much innovation returning to the Bitcoin ecosystem. The number of the overall developer interest and number of developers on Bitcoin has been growing tremendously this year. There's been protocols like ordinals and BRC20s as a result of the Taproot upgrade. SBDC is another such example of a project trying to build more programmability on top of Bitcoin, and it's really why I'm excited for this next phase of Bitcoin's development, where you can offer a lot more expressivity and programmability on top of the network. And again, we know Bitcoin is well suited for this purpose because it is the most available and secure settlement layer. It settles over $15 trillion in annual transaction volume and has had 100% uptime over the past 10 years. However, despite these advantages, Bitcoin is still limited in scalability and programmability. And these choices are by design in order to provide more stability and reliability at the base layer and reduce the overall attack surface for vulnerabilities. But I've talked to a lot of developers, and a few themes around some common challenges have emerged. One is high transaction fees, especially during periods of network congestion. Slow block times, which is a really poor user experience, especially for developers having to wait 10 to 30 minutes at times, and a lack of expressivity in Bitcoin's script. So even though there's been a lot of new experimentation happening this year, it's still really difficult to build more expressive smart contract functionality on the Bitcoin layer 1. So the key question is, how do we bring DeFi to Bitcoin? SBDC is really what we're focused on. It's a Bitcoin-backed programmable asset that the goal for it is to put your Bitcoin to work in a secure and decentralized way. So here's how that works. A user would send Bitcoin to the SBDC protocol multisig, which is secured by a threshold set of signers. These signers are running a version of a stack signer node, which reads Bitcoin blocks and can detect that that transaction has confirmed. At that point, SBDC is minted on the Stacks layer, in which it is fully able to be used in DeFi, NFTs, and other smart contract-based applications. Here's some of the advantages and why people might want to use a protocol like this. First of all, it's permissionless, which is different than the vast majority of similar projects that are on the market that tend to use a more of a federated or closed multi-sig model, where there's a handful of trusted entities that are responsible for securing the Bitcoin that is being held. SBDC is an open membership model. It means that anyone can run a validator and contribute to the security of the network and process the peg in and peg out transactions. It's fast, so with the upcoming Nakamoto upgrade on the Stacks layer, we expect transaction latency to be reduced to around 5 seconds. So this can really be a true scalability solution for Bitcoin. And with these new consensus rules, transactions on the Stacks layer will receive 100% of Bitcoin's rework resistance by removing the ability to fork the Stacks network. And lastly, there's a better UX than building on the Bitcoin L1, thanks to a lot of the tooling that's been developed in the ecosystem and the ability to access more expressive smart contracts. There's a much better experience for building decentralized and programmable applications on top of Bitcoin. So the next question is, how big is this opportunity, and how should we think about the opportunity for building programmable applications on top of Bitcoin? Well, I'd like to start with some market comps. So you take the market cap of Ethereum DeFi that currently sits at around 40 billion in market cap. Compare that to the market cap of ETH, which at today's values is roughly around 200 billion, so roughly 20%. But now compare that to Bitcoin, which is the largest public cryptocurrency that exists today at a $550 billion market cap, and yet it has a really small on-chain application value, so small that the value doesn't even really register for this chart. And you can do some back-of-the-envelope math to show that if we were to value that at, let's say, $1 billion, it represents likely 100x increase if Bitcoin DeFi were to reach the size of Ethereum DeFi. And that, of course, assumes that there isn't any additional growth to Bitcoin, which we think is unlikely. So I've been talking a lot about the Bitcoin economy. I wanted to actually visualize what we mean by this. So Bitcoin, again, is at the base layer. It's the foundational bedrock and immutable source of trust to power the digital economy. And then you have the smart contracts layer. So Stacks is a layer that sits on top of Bitcoin, which powers the SBDC protocol. And then you have the apps and services layer on top. And so these are just a handful of applications that have launched on Stacks and are prepared to integrate SBDC, everything from decentralized lending, atomic swaps between Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and Bitcoin on the Stacks network, decentralized exchange, and many other use cases are currently being explored. Again, just a small sample of some of the experimentation we've been seeing on Bitcoin L2s. And so what can you really build with this? There's a few categories of use cases that I'm really interested in. The first is on-chain lending and borrowing, and the ability to access stablecoin liquidity without any central counterparty. I think there still isn't really a great way to do on-chain lending using Bitcoin, but there's significant market demand for this, to be able to use Bitcoin as collateral to take out a stablecoin loan, whether it's to, you know, make a large purchase, like maybe you want to buy a house one day, or you know, you have to pay a tax bill but don't want to have to sell your Bitcoin to pay for that. So being able to access lending and borrowing markets, and also potentially unlocking the ability to earn a yield on your Bitcoin by deploying it in these sorts of applications. Again, there isn't really any great way to do that today, and I think that is a large market that we could open with a programmable Bitcoin asset. Second is derivatives and options trading. So being able to trade Bitcoin on chain and use it as collateral for derivatives. So likewise to the previous example, there still isn't really a great way to just trade Bitcoin for USDC or Tether directly on chain without going through a centralized exchange or some other counterparty. And also the ability to, you know, put your Bitcoin as collateral to go long and short, and use in different perpetuals or derivatives trading. I think there's a very large market of users that would want to use their Bitcoin for these sorts of trading use cases. Next is peer-to-peer payments, so the ability to unlock applications that leverage scalable, low-cost transfers. I think especially if we see, you know, an influx in activity on the Bitcoin network, which could result in higher fees and more congestion, I think that more users will be pushed to layers on top of Bitcoin that can really begin to solve many of these challenges. And so that's one example that could be enabled through platforms like this. And lastly is escrow and insurance. Locking Bitcoin in escrow payments, I think, is a really interesting model. An example of that could be anything from like a Bitcoin based payroll system, or maybe some sort of freelancing app where a company can post a bounty directly in Bitcoin, and that bounty is paid out when a user you know, submits the completed task. And again, that's just held in escrow and can be executed permissionlessly. And, you know, as of this past week, we have hit one of our early milestones with SBDC, so it's deployed on DevNet. So, you know, this release included end-to-end deposit and withdrawals, so you can test the functionality of moving Bitcoin onto the Stacks layer. There's some developer tools like an SDK and CLI to be able to do this. And then there's a bridge web application and API. The web app provides an interface to be able to interact with the protocol, and the API allows developers to build this functionality directly into their applications to make it really make the process really seamless for their users. And yeah, together we can build the economy, build the Bitcoin economy. Thank you, everyone. And you can feel free to check out more of my writing on this topic. Write a blog called Bitcoin Rights, where we work in the public. Everything is open sourced, and you know, I talk about SBDC product development on there. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you for your time. And I think, Michael, you can host. It's your turn.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you for that interesting presentation. Yeah, so up next, we would like to invite Tom Rakis. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. I'd like to invite you to give your presentation. Welcome, Tom. Tom from Evervision.
Hey everyone, let me share my screen. All right. So thank you for having me today. I'm here to talk about Arweave and specifically the PermaWeb. Arweave is a network like Bitcoin, but for data, a permanent decentralized web inside an open ledger. The PermaWeb is a suite of services that sits on top of the Arweave protocol. You have gateway services, bundling services, and indexing services. Gateway services serve data as web data. So if you store an HTML file on Arweave, it will render that HTML file to a browser. Bundling services allows you to essentially bundle large amounts of data and publish it on Arweave so that it can essentially become available instantly. So you get near real-time data availability through bundling services. And then finally, indexing services is a way to query data on the PermaWeb. So these building blocks, and with the decentralized network of Arweave, you can build applications and you can publish those applications on chain. So PermaWeb applications are very similar to web applications, but they essentially live on Arweave. Therefore, they're permanent. And then users can interact with those applications with wallets. The values of the PermaWeb is to be useful, scalable, and complete. And it's a different kind of mindset when building applications on the PermaWeb, because you are building applications to last, forever, right? Or for a long time. So again, when you publish on Arweave an application, it's going to be there for as long as Arweave is around, which the way the endowment is set up is to be forever. Now, just a little bit on how this works is when you publish data on Arweave, you have the ability to include tags, and these tags are key value pair or metadata that you can put alongside the data. And here's a couple of example tags like content type. If you make content type text/HTML, then the gateway will read that and provide that data to a web browser appropriately. And then you have tags like title and description, and the developer can determine what tags they want, as well as the user. And we use these tags to really kind of create these protocols that allow for data to be accessed in a discoverable way. So when you have a gateway, each gateway has an indexer built in, GraphQL, and you can run these queries to retrieve data from the PermaWeb. So you get this giant data lake, and then using tags, you can make that data discoverable by querying it with GraphQL. And we have several protocols on specs.arweave.dev. Some of the most important ones are asset discoverability, ANS 110. And essentially this protocol says you can put a type, a title, a description, and topics with every bit of data that you store, and that allows and services to find that data and present it to the user. The specification data protocol, this protocol allows you to specify other protocols to really define how data is shown to the user, and we call these renderers. And these renderers can be tagged with the data item, and then, for example, music file can have a renderer of an audio player. So the audio player can load that music file and play it. And then the atomic asset. And the atomic asset is very similar to an NFT, but because the contract and the tags and the data are stored with the same identifier, it's atomic. So the contract and the data cannot be separated. We use atomic assets to trade on the PermaWeb. Currently, ANS 110 was released around a year ago, and currently is still being adopted. And you can see by this chart from Data OS that the type is really being adopted. So every data that's being published to Arweave now, about 80% has the type, but we do have a long way to go to get the title and description. So we're working to get, title and description on data that wants to be discoverable. And we hope to see that increase over the next year. And then another thing that this unlocks is the universal data license. The universal data license uses these tags to allow for creators to specify the rights of the data, how it should be accessed, how it should be purchased with a license fee, and can it be used for derivative works? Can it be used in commercial use? So the universal data license really is a way for creators to put their data online, but also identify the terms of how that data is to be interacted with, which has been very well received in the community. You can see by Data OS that we're getting a lot of assets created on the PermaWeb with UDL licenses. So this is continuing to grow as creators move into our platform. So that's kind of the building blocks of the PermaWeb. And what I would like to do now is kind of go through a few applications. And I know Sam went through Alex, which allows you to create pools, and those pools can be operated by operators, and people can contribute to essentially preserve data onto the Arweave blockweave. And another interesting application that is on the PermaWeb is called the FAIR protocol. And the FAIR protocol is an AI marketplace. So open source AI models can be published to this marketplace, and then operators can run those models and accept the PermaWeb token U. And the U token allows for you to, at a very low cost, use these models to generate images or text, etc. So it's really neat, and it's worth checking out. Another application is a very simple application called PermaPages, which allows you to create a profile page or just a free markdown driven web page on the PermaWeb. And each page is a standalone HTML page. So you can do a blog post or just a content site or a profile page very, very easily. And yeah, it's pretty fun. And then another application that was just released 3 months ago is called Bazaar. And Bazaar is a marketplace that not only allows you to trade PFPs, but you can trade music, you can trade video, you can trade 3D objects. So it shows you how creators can publish their assets and users can interact. And the one neat thing about Bazaar is it shows off a lot of protocols that we have been developing. One that I've been developing is the stamps protocol. And the stamps protocol, if you can see on the screen, there's like 30 and this little icon. It allows users to stamp any asset on the permaweb. And again, that kind of helps with discoverability to see what is popular and what's being mostly used. And then finally, most recently, Forward Research Group released this atomic asset generator, which is a creator tool that allows any creator a very easy process to upload their assets, specify their licensing, and list on Bazaar. So again, we're just kind of building these permanent apps that are very, very web-like. And the notion is that, you know, while we're trying to build a better internet where you have you know, access with your wallet, and you have just total control of your data. And on top of all this is we have a token called U, which kind of stands for the unit of account for the permaweb. And basically, you can take your R tokens and get U, and then you can interact with the Fair Protocol app or Bazaar app. So it becomes this internal token that you can interact with all of the permaweb apps without having to, you know, go to any centralized services to exchange things. It's also, everything is decentralized. Everything is running within the permaweb, and you can use decentralized services like PermaSwap to be your on-ramp and off-ramp onto the permaweb. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Definitely recommend checking it out. My name's Tom. I'm founder in residence at Forward Research. I work on the stamp protocol and the universal content marketplace. And yeah, really excited about the permaweb and the future of the internet. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for your time. And I think, yes, let's looking forward to the permaweb. Yeah. Yes. And Michael, I think that is your turn. You can help us to.
Yes, yeah. So up next we have Paul, but this is a different Paul from KYVE, not LayerTwo
Yes.
Labs. Yeah, Paul Brahmas. Sorry if I'm butchering your last name. Please come on, and looking forward to your presentation.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, loud and clear.
I'm gonna share my screen then. Okay. I should be okay. Yeah, so I'm Paul from Kive. Nice to meet you. I'm a head of ecosystem at Kive. So for those who are not familiar with Kive, I will do a quick presentation about what we are building and how we start Kive. And then after I will demo explain some of the use cases. So Kive basically is come from the archive. So we just kept Kive. So Kive started as a bounty between Parity Foundation and Arweave. So the bounty was how we can basically import all historical data of Polkadot blockchain into Arweave in a decentralized manner, meaning keeping the decentralized aspect of those data, because if there is only a single man uploading those data, you are not sure the data uploaded on Arweave are correct. So the idea of Kive came, and then after it started to be a company or two co-founders started pitching Kive to other layer ones such Solana, Avalanche, Near, Cosmos, Mina, and so on. And then, yeah, after they received some funding, and we are building since 2 years. We are in mainnet since 6 months right now, but we'll give you a few more details about that in the next slide. So how Kive work? It's pretty easy. For each data stream, we have a data pool, and on those data pool, we have a bunch of a set of validators. So currently it's 50 per data pool. So as you can see on the schema, we can upload like blockchains and DApps data. In fact, we can upload also like any kind of deterministic data. So like that can be Web3 data, so historical data of blockchain, but also Web2 data, such weather data, carbon credit data, and so on and so on. Just need to be deterministic because we need to execute a function that will say if the data are correct or no. So it's for that. It's only with this kind of data. So in simple terms, how it works. We have a set of validator for each data pool. So let's say we have a data pool for Cosmos Hub. So all these validators will run on their own Gaia node that will be their data source. One will be selected randomly according to the size of the stake. We'll take a bundle of data. So let's say block 1 to 150, upload this bundle of data into Arweave, come back with the hash of the upload into the data pool, and submit this hash to the validators. Because those data are deterministic, no matter how many data sources you have, like the data should always be the same. So validators will check if the data that have been uploaded match with their data source. If the data match, the validators will vote. So basically either yes, no, or abstain. If you reach out a quorum of yes, the data is marked as valid and we store the hash on Kive blockchain. If not, the uploader gets slashed. And if the validator abstain, that's have no impact. It can't just be selected to be the next uploader in the next bundle. So to incentivize people to upload data and validate data, we have a process that is called the funding. So basically, someone will fund the pool to incentivize the validators and uploaders to behave correctly. If a pool run on a fund, the pool don't stop because we have inflation splitting, but the rewards for the validators and uploader are reduced. So people are less incentive to run a validator on this pool. Currently on our mainnet, we have 4 pools running. So we have Cosmos Hub, Arweave, Osmosis, and Axelar. And all those data have been stored on Arweave. So for now, after 6 months of mainnet, if I'm not saying wrong, we have archived 1 terabyte, 1.27 terabyte of data, onto Arweave. So all those data are accessible for free and are stored permanently thanks to Arweave solution. To retrieve those data, it's free forever and for everyone, and it's fully decentralized, meaning you don't need to rely on someone that can say, no, you will not access those data. So we make historical data of blockchain truly public good for everyone. There is few ways of retrieving the data. So you can either retrieve those data through REST API or through the ELT pipeline that Kive has built. So we have built this solution in partnership with Airbyte. So an ELT pipeline is basically you extract, load, and transform the data. You can import those data into almost any data warehouse. So right now we are supporting more than 60 destinations. So MyGraphSQL, MongoDB, Postgres, Snowflake, etc., etc. You can then import those data, as I say, for free, or you can use other solution that you can build on yourself. This solution that is available right now, the ELT pipeline, is one of the best in our opinion, because it's key in end, and it's basically no code solution. So that doesn't cost you anything, and it's super easy to access. We have also developed another tool on top of that that is called K-Sync. So right now, if you want to state sync your node with any proof of stake mechanism, layer 1 or either, let's say, layer 2, you will ask either a snapshot, so it's very centralized, and you will need to trust the person that provided you the snapshot that the data actually provided are correct, or you will state sync your node, download the entire state of the blockchain from Genesis to the latest state. That's going to take time, and that's going to be costly depending on the chain that you want to sync with. So thanks to Kive leveraging Arweave, we are developing right now, so it's only working for Thunder Mint runtime, but will be extended to other chain in the future. K-Sync. So basically, you need an archival data from a chain, no matter which chain, between block Y and Z. And currently you will wait between 1 or 2 weeks to process, and then you don't need those data any longer. So that's can be the case for like a wallet provider, node runner, whatever, like accounting solution, whatever. With K-Sync, it will be like possible that in less than 2 minutes, you will be able to sync the chain from any 8 in a completely decentralized way, meaning you will rely on data that are fully trustless. So you don't need to trust someone if you are doing your accounting or so on, that you want to avoid. Because like for big company that will join Web3 in the future, like institutional, that's their biggest fear of like having wrong data and being wrong and do like wrong decision with those wrong data. And it's basically what we are solving with K-Sync. So in terms of integration, right now, we have integrated only Tendermint runtime chain. So as I say, Osmosis, Cosmos Hub, Arweave, and Axelar, we plan to extend to other like Tendermint runtime, such DYDX, probably Celestia, and a few other names that are big in the Cosmos ecosystem. And in 2024, we will extend to other blockchain, such Polkadot, Solana, Mina, Avalanche, Celo, Near, and probably also LayerTwo. The idea is really how we make like archival node decentralized and public good for everyone. That are some of the use cases we are focusing on. And after, like, we are like participating also in hackathon, sponsoring hackathon to extend the use cases around Kive. We have some people that have built an aggregator of governance. So basically it was fetching the data, the comments, so the data of governance that was posted off-chain and validating them in a decentralized way before storing them on Arweave to make sure that those data and those comments from validators on the Cosmos Hub chain were accessible for everyone and permanently for free and forever. So it's some of the use cases that we have. Yeah, that's it on my side. If you have any question or anything you want to implement or use Kive as a source of data, feel free to reach out to us. We are fully permissionless, meaning you can create your own data pool with your own data stream through the governance. We're gonna help you and like guide you through all this process if needed. Don't hesitate to come on our Discord if you have any technical question or check our GitHub. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your time. And I think that is a great speech, and we enjoy it. Yes. And I think next, yes.
Next we have the Dr. Senkhan Berajit. Sorry, I'm not able to pronounce that, from Babylon. Welcome. Please, Doctor, let's have your presentation.
Hello. Oh, I think he's not here. Just wait me a minute and I will call him. Wait. Okay, he's coming. So wait a minute. Doctor Sankar Banerjee is from Babylon. Yes, he is a lead of product. So let us wait. Hello, Dr. Sankar Banerjee. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
Yeah, I apologize for this. Like my flight got delayed, so but I'm I'm good to go now. Sorry for that.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. So you can share your screen and give us your speech. Yeah.
So when I share the screen, do you mean like to show my face, or do you mean to show the deck?
Show the deck. Yes, I think.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. So I can just go ahead and give the whole talk, right? That's
Yes.
basically what you mean? Okay,
Yeah.
cool, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So is my deck visible?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Thank you everyone for having me for this talk. So I'm the head of product strategy at Babylon. At Babylon, we are a team of researchers, builders, developers, and professors. We are mainly based out of Stanford University on the West Coast in United States. And we've been kind of working on consensus protocol design, as well as finding use cases for Bitcoin over the last 2 years. And Bitcoin staking is a product we are taking to the market over the next 6 months. What is Bitcoin staking? We are building a dual marketplace for using Bitcoin security to secure proof of stake chains, and in return, giving Bitcoin holders POS yield. So this talk is going to be about the design and our go-to-market strategies. So we are very excited about Bitcoin as an asset class because it's probably roughly 60% of the crypto market cap right now, around 550 billion. And it has some very unique properties for Bitcoin, which helps us to kind of define our use case. So what are these properties? So Bitcoin as an asset class is heavily decentralized. It's the least volatile crypto asset in the crypto ecosystem. It's kind of idle, like there's not that many use cases which has been developed over the years. And unencumbered, the way we interpret is that Bitcoin as an asset class has the least centralized intervention. So if you are building a use case on top of Bitcoin, then fundamentally that use case can actually be very sustainable because it has the least censorship. It's the most censorship-resistant platform out there in crypto. So at Babylon, we identified these characteristics of Bitcoin, and we felt that Bitcoin does not have staking as a capability. And we in Babylon are the first to bring staking, which is a security primitive for POS chains, to Bitcoin. I'm going to explain the word staking very detailed over the talk, but just to give you a quick idea for people who are not in the POS system, staking is a methodology by which proof of stake blockchains secure themselves. And this is a methodology which has not been available for Bitcoin holders. So for Babylon, we are trying to bring this primitive to Bitcoin. So if we look at the Bitcoin architecture, right, it's a heavily decentralized trust where the trust is being run by the miners. It operates on this proof of work consensus. And one of the limitations which probably causes a lot less use cases being developed on Bitcoin is the limited programmability of the Bitcoin scripting. So in order to kind of overcome this limited programmability, there were a lot of consensus protocols on the proof of stake side, which was built, Cosmos, Polygon, Ethereum. So for us, the way we identify Bitcoin is that it's a proof of work asset, and we are trying to turn Bitcoin into a staking asset where Bitcoin can be staked in all these major POS systems. So why are we so interested in bringing staking as a primitive to the Bitcoin asset class? Because there is a JP Morgan Chase study where they are projecting that the staking market cap over the next 10 years is going to be roughly 300 billion. As of today, the top 10 POS chains have a market cap of 70 billion. And of this, $400 million of monthly rewards are being paid to the stakers. Again, I want to kind of give you a clear definition of staking. Staking is where you take the native token of the POS chain and you lock it in order to get the block rewards on the proof of stake chain. So fundamentally, it is that you're getting paid for offering security to the proof of stake blockchain. This primitive, we are trying to bring it to the Bitcoin holders. So we know that we are heading into a halving over the next 6-7 months, and we think that the Bitcoin holders, whether the miners or the Bitcoin holders, they would like to have more access to yield opportunities. And we think this is like a perfect mapping of the demand which is there in the staking market in POS and the Bitcoin security, the decentralized security, which is there from the Bitcoin asset class. So it's kind of a very good product market fit that you have a very growing demand for security in the POS chains, and you have liquidity from the Bitcoin stakers who are looking for this additional yield. So we at Babylon, we consider our protocol as a two-sided marketplace where we enable the Bitcoin holders to create their stake on the POS chain, and in return, they get POS yield. So let's really kind of talk a little bit more about how this design works, right? So ideally, in a POS blockchain, you use your POS token, and that's like the token is basically having a market price. And what you're doing is you're locking your token to provide security for the POS chains. And most POS chains, they have very defined slashing condition. The word slashing means that if you are, while you're providing security, if you do any kind of bad activity could be signing on 2 blocks at the same height, then you get penalized for this bad activity. So most POS chains, they have very defined slashing conditions. When we come to the proof of work, we know that Bitcoin has a very strong decentralized trust, which is spread over the miners all across the world. And it's being run over proof of work. And it fundamentally does not have the slashing mechanism. So you go and you use the Bitcoin staking algorithm from Babylon. And for the first time, we are incorporating slashing for Bitcoin holders. And what that means is when you lock your Bitcoin on a POS chain to provide security, if the validator double signs, then your Bitcoin would get slashed. Then on top of that, this is trustless staking. So we are creating this technology where you don't need to use a bridge, you don't need to use custodian. And finally, we're also enabling restaking, which means for your Bitcoin, you can not just secure one proof of stake chain, but you can secure multiple proof of stake chains, which creates capital efficiency for the capital you're providing. Now you have the POS side. So what you are doing is that the POS chains are giving you the POS yield to the Bitcoin holders, and the Bitcoin holders are giving cheaper decentralized security to the POS chains. So it's the first time we have built this two-sided marketplace, and you can see a kind of a product map that you have the supply coming from Bitcoin, and then you have the demand coming from the POS chains. So let's dive deeper into what Bitcoin staking means and how did Babylon come about with this design. So the first thing we are doing is we know that Bitcoin does not have smart contracts, and we have also not forked the Bitcoin chain. So this is literally on the original Bitcoin chain. So we are getting the Bitcoin capital from the Bitcoin holders to the proof of stake chains. And when we are bringing this capital, we are not using a bridge, we are not using a custodian. So fundamentally, if you have to discuss Bitcoin staking on Babylon, it's giving you first-class citizenship as the native token on a POS chain, and it's also not using any kind of trust framework. So we're using the same trust framework of Bitcoin and nothing additional to it. So let's really kind of try to understand this from a picture point of view. So Alice has one Bitcoin. She can go to the Bitcoin chain and she can lock her Bitcoin in a staking contract. So the staking contract has two functionalities. One is it locks you for a certain time frame. Let's say it's 6 months here. And second is if you do any bad activity on the POS chain, the staking contract can actually burn the token which you have locked, which is Bitcoin in this case. So what is a bad activity? So let's say once Alice stakes on Bitcoin, this capital is available for osmosis and your validator is validating. If at some point the validator validates the same block at the same height, two different blocks at the same height, that's a double sign. That is something which you get penalized on a proof of stake network. And in order to incorporate this penalization, which is the slashing, what happens is that the key, the private key of Alice's stake gets revealed, and anyone who has access to this private key can move the money from Alice's wallet to their wallet or to another DAO. So if Alice does not exhibit any bad behavior on the POS chain, then as the time period of her staking contract gets over, Alice can unstake and opt in the reward on the POS chain. The two important parts on top of this, which we have been able to design, is what if Alice stakes, but Alice doesn't like the rewards on the POS chain? Then how fast, because Alice locked herself for 6 months and she doesn't like the rewards, how fast can she get the money back? That's roughly around 3 days. This 3 days can be shortened even more, but fundamentally this time period is kept to make sure that there is no collusion between Alice and the miners on the Bitcoin network. Finally, is this technology specific to one blockchain or can it be applied to any POS chain? And what we have done through our design is we have been able to enable the technology for every chain. So what we mean is any POS chain, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Solana, Polkadot, Aptos, they can use the Babylon's BTC staking technology to onboard BTC capital from the Bitcoin chain in a trustless manner to their POS chains. So we have talked about the technology, we have understood what Bitcoin staking is. Because we are heading towards some form of a mainnet over the next few months, we want to give like what is our go-to-market and who are the partners who are helping us take this product to market. So we would identify ourselves as the first two-sided marketplace, which is bringing proof of stake yield from different ecosystems to the Bitcoin holders. So if you imagine that Babylon as an ecosystem is an L1, So we are onboarding the retail Bitcoin from the OKX wallet. We are onboarding the institutional Bitcoin from BitDigital, F2 Pool, and Galaxy. And then finally, we can actually use this Bitcoin to stake and secure L2s and rollups, which are being built on top of the Bitcoin chain itself. The interesting thing of offering security for such a software would be that you get paid in Bitcoin. So there will be a certain amount of Bitcoin holders who would like to just get paid in Bitcoin. And then there would be Bitcoin holders who would like to get paid in the POS tokens. So on the POS tokens, we are planning to offer Cosmos, Polygon, Arbitrum, and other POS chains. And so holistically, we see that we can use Babylon to get Bitcoin yield in Bitcoin on the Bitcoin stack, or we can get the POS yield from the other chains for the Bitcoin holders. So one important aspect of the Bitcoin staking is that we think that we have enabled a lot more than just staking itself. So if you're a Bitcoin staker and you use Babylon, then you can not just secure with your capital one chain, but many chains. So restaking, where you're allowing the same Bitcoin to be staked across multiple networks, that creates a very interesting diversified yield. What if you as a Bitcoin holder, you feel very bullish about an Oracle and you feel very bullish about a POS network? You can choose these two networks to create an yield between using restaking. Finally, it's also a lot more capital efficient because you're using a same capital to secure multiple networks. Fundamentally, the good thing for the POS and the middleware is that they are getting almost the same security as the Babylon market cap. Before this technology was enabled, what happened is each of these chains, they would have their own security market cap, which is based on their own token. But using Babylon, now they can standardize their security. So their own POS security is as good as the Bitcoin stake on Babylon. Finally, the Bitcoin stakers have the ability to participate in the governance of the POS. So the Bitcoin staker would choose the POS network based on what their desired yield capacities are. And the POS network would choose what is a return they would like to give to the Bitcoin staker and what is a vesting period of that return. So fundamentally, even though Bitcoin has limited programmability, we, through Babylon, have created a lot of advanced utilities for Bitcoin without changing the programmability aspect of Bitcoin. Finally, we talked about the POS network heavily over the last few slides. I do want to talk about a project which Babylon is incubating on top of the Bitcoin chain, and this is a Bitcoin rollup. And what you are doing here is you're kind of pooling your Bitcoin, staking it through Babylon, and this Bitcoin rollup, it's trying to improve the speed of Bitcoin transactions, in turn improving the infrastructure on Bitcoin. And one aspect is they are trying to also bring the smart contract functionalities on top of Bitcoin. So you can think of this product as more like an optimistic rollup, which you see on the Ethereum side, like Optimism and Arbitrum. So generally with these optimistic rollups, the security really comes down to proving the validity of the state transition, right? So what this project is trying to use is they're trying to use the Bitcoin staking platform of Babylon in order to create fidelity in this state transition. So if Babylon is able to create a more fidelity for this state transition, what happens is they don't need to go down to the Bitcoin layer. And in the Bitcoin layer, if they have to use that's the latency is around 36 minutes. So whereas with Babylon, they're trying to do it at a lot shorter time scale. So yeah, that's basically the logic. And one aspect we wanted to show is where we have talked about the idea, we have talked about the different protocols which are using Babylon. Now, where are we in the roadmap? So we released our timestamping around February, and then we use a proof of concept in July, and then we use the staking testnet at the end of this year. And once we go to mainnet over next year, our plan is to go more on the data availability and the liquidity marketplace. We consider that security is the first step before heading towards data availability and liquidity. And fundamentally, right now, we have 36 Cosmos chains integrated on our timestamping. If you go to our website, you can actually see that. We have actually had a governance proposal passed through osmosis, which validated the need for Bitcoin security. And we have released a Bitcoin staking proof of concept in last month's Cosmoverse. So very happy to kind of, stay in touch. This is our Twitter, this is our website. We're also very active on Discord and social media. So if anyone has any questions, very happy to answer those questions. Thank you for listening to my talk.
Thank
Okay.
you, Dr. Sankar. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Am I good or should I need to stay on the call?
I think you still have a panel after two
Okay.
speeches. So maybe you could stay here, yeah, and join
Okay.
it. Yeah. And I
Okay,
think
perfect.
next is Louis Dharma from Hansen Network. Yes, Louis, you can share your screen and give us your speech.
Hey everyone, nice to meet everyone. Thanks to PermaDAO and everyone associated for hosting me and Hansa along today. So let me just quickly share my screen. Perfect. Just let me know when everyone can see that.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Look, I know a fair few people, especially in the Arweave ecosystem, have heard a little bit about Hansa, but for those that don't, essentially Hansa invests, incubates, and accelerates networks that power the future of open societies on Web3. Essentially, we're a crypto native fund, accelerator, and we also have an advisory arm as well, which we spun up late 2022. We were actually first early supporters of Arweave from the funding point of view, and we're always looking at supporting projects that are building truly novel innovations in the Arweave space and well beyond as well, even in the BTC Bitcoin ecosystems as well. So a little bit about, actually, let me just change this a bit. Page. One sec. I think we're missing a slide. All right, cool. So a little bit about me. I actually run the advisory and accelerator arms at Hansa. And previously to that, I was heading up growth at Immutable. From the strategic sort of point of view, from an advisory point of view, we offer support with access to leading networks of Web3 mentors, leaders, and investors across the leading projects like Polygon, Immutable, Binance, Chain Analysis, and of course, Arweave itself. So whenever protocols need actual acceleration and support when it comes to growth, go to market, we're always there to lend a hand, as well as our funding support as well from our VC. So if there's any novel projects out there listening in, we'd always love to have a chat. Our doors are always open when it comes to any type of support. And today specifically, I wanted to talk about three main things. And it's going to be a little bit more macro than a lot of the technical sort of stuff I know a lot of the other speakers have sort of talked about. But number one, I wanted to talk about, obviously most people know how Hansa is super bullish on the ecosystem as a whole, but I wanted to touch upon my personal story and what about these two ecosystems from the Bitcoin ecosystem and the Arweave ecosystem actually attracted me into Web3 in the first place. Number two, I actually wanted to talk about the second pillar of building out an open society beyond financial access and how that second pillar is actually one of the greatest threats facing humanity right now. And it's actually going under the radar for most people. And then thirdly, I wanted to talk about the crossroads of humanity right now and the opportunity we actually have to rebuild new systems from the ground up instead of propagating the old systems. So I'm not going to bore you with my whole backstory, but I wanted to quickly share why I decided to make the leap into Web3, because it will give a good picture on why I'm so bullish on BTC and the Arweave ecosystems as a whole. After nearly 15 years in Web2, building, investing, and advising many Web2 projects, I came to the end of the road and I was actually completely burnt out. And I came to a really disheartening conclusion. While the Web 2 era ushered in many technological advancements, it actually missed a lot of key areas that I thought was super important. At the end of the day, we're in the most advanced time in human history, yet factors like suicide rates were at an all-time high, human fulfillment was down, and global happiness and fulfillment was pretty much stagnant all around in most geographies, which meant there was actual clear misalignment with technological progress and human progress. And that's where my search began for a new solution. And as many of you know, this led me down the rabbit hole and ended up finding Satoshi's white paper and being seduced by the Web3 ethos as a whole. With Web3 tech, it was the first time I actually saw technology and you could actually create true alignment with human progress and technological progress. Web3 for me represents the intersection of technology, philosophy, and economy together. It gives us the opportunity to rebuild systems from the ground up instead of propagating the old systems, which is why Web3 Bitcoin is a lot more than just the new thing, and it's more than just the obvious next wave in technology. It's actually breaking the cycle, and it's the foundations of a new future that we're all trying to build right now, which is why compared to so many other technological revolutions throughout history, the passion within both the Bitcoin community, the Arweave community, and the wider Web3 community as a whole is absolutely incredible and is second to none. We've never seen this kind of passion across different stakeholders throughout history. So obviously, I don't have to say, when it comes to Web3, as it stands right now, over the last decade, the market so far has been focused on finance since the beginning. And when it comes to the core pillars of open societies, while financial access is absolutely crucial, there's actually another pillar that needs to be addressed. Bitcoin and a lot of Web3 has done a great job in the war against financial censorship, but I think the world right now is ready to take on that next frontier. And another core pillar of what makes a truly free open society, and that next core pillar is access to the free flow of information. Look, it's clear the war against information censorship is at our doors, and like BTC and that ecosystem was doing and is doing for financial censorship, I believe the Arweave ecosystem in particular is best positioned to win this new war. Now, obviously, I don't have to sing the praises of BTC and Arweave to folks, obviously the folks listening here today. As they proudly show on the Arweave website itself, Arweave is very similar to Bitcoin, but for data. And I believe it's one of the key inputs to unlocking truly free and open societies. Look, when most people actually talk about Arweave, they talk about three main points, right? They talk about creating a decentralized permanent storage for any kind of data, ensure information isn't lost, censored, or altered. And then number three, ensure all storage is cost effective. Now, while all 3 points are actually crucial, point number two was actually the reason I joined Hansa and personally resonate so much with the Arweave ecosystem as a whole. So at the end of the day, ensuring information isn't lost, censored, or altered. This is the point I really want to stress today because it's something that's super easy to gloss over, but it has many, many layers that will deeply affect humanity in the future. So let me just go into a few examples. I'm sure we've all heard of the stories about the Twitter files and how their internal teams could influence the entire Twitter algorithm with certain biases. This is something I actually experienced firsthand. During my Web2 days, I got to work super close with the algorithm teams at Facebook and Instagram. I saw firsthand how people's personal biases within the team affected the algorithm. And it was absolutely crazy for me to see how people's beliefs could actually affect the content and information that billions of people using the platform would see on a daily basis. And I really want to stress that point home. I was literally seeing a handful of people in a single room that were dictating the information over 1 billion people would see on their newsfeed every single day. And unfortunately, this is the same story that repeats across most centralized content and information houses. And the ironic thing was that most of the people working there, working in these algorithm teams, were actually great people, A lot of them were very kind-hearted and had zero malice whatsoever. But as the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how well-intentioned someone is. There should be no single arbiter of truth. We are all corruptible one way or another, and no one is exempt from this. The truth is that when you alter the flow of information, it's a lot more dangerous than most people actually think about. So the easy examples to point to is when you obviously manipulate information and try to change things like the election. We all saw that when it comes to Trump and everything that happened with Hillary Clinton and everything like that back in the day. It's super easy to point to those kind of examples in terms of elections and controlling financial markets, but controlling information flows goes far beyond this. When you actually manipulate information flows, you manipulate global human behavior on a fundamental level. When you distort information, you shape people's perception of reality itself. And I know that might sound a bit hyperbolic, but it's something each of us have actually experienced in our lives. And I'm actually going to prove it to you now. So I want you to think just for a single moment, if you go all the way back to when maybe you were a baby or when you see a baby when they were born, they were literally born with absolutely nothing. Every single baby is born with absolutely nothing. We weren't born with any possessions. We weren't born with any beliefs. We were a blank slate, ready to take on whatever the world gave us, right? And I don't think any of us were born vegetarians or meat eaters. None of us were born already being Catholic, Hindu, or Christian. None of us were born left-wing or right-wing. None of us were born with political ideologies. We weren't born with any beliefs at all. So the question is, where did all these beliefs and behaviors come from? They all came from external information sources. Things like TV, social media, books, parents, teachers, and everything like that. So essentially who we are is just an amalgamation of external inputs. So it's very, very clear that if you can control someone's access to external information, you can control their way of thinking and behavior. So as I said, there's many, many sources where people get external information from, like TV, parents, books. However, in this ever-growing digital world, less and less people will actually rely on a lot of these sources. So less people rely on teachers these days, less people rely on books and parents, and more people start using the same few central social media platforms for their information outlet. And with more and more reports of these social media companies manipulating algorithms, trust in information has never been lower. And now with the advent of generative AI, it's only going to get more confusing. The exponential influx of information and speculative content will become more difficult for us to navigate without a proper balancing mechanism. It's becoming pretty much nearly impossible to tell where content actually comes from, its quality, whether it's been changed or manipulated. And we're even getting to a point now where it's very hard to tell whether it's from a human source or not. So for us to really realize the dream of building open societies, we must be able to solve our ability to navigate the world of infinite information and unlock a few key areas. One, you need to be able to verify the source where information comes from and the provenance of it. You need to be able to check if that information has been changed in any way. You need to be able to create reputation-based systems to filter information based on merit rather than biased algorithms. And in a world of infinite information that is actually speculative, ultimately, we need to bring trust and transparency to information we consume. So thankfully, this is why I'm so passionate about supporting anything I can within the Arweave and Bitcoin ecosystems, because I truly believe it is one of the front runners solving these problems at a root level. And if there's anything I want to leave with everyone here today, and I know everyone here is super passionate about the ecosystem, but at the end of the day, do not underestimate the part you're playing in society right now. The next 10 years may dictate the next 100 or even 1,000. And it's a lot more important than making a few degens rich or retiring early. Alongside financial censorship, solving information censorship is part of solving humanity's biggest problems on the root level. So as I stand here today, talking to everyone here, I could not be more proud to be a part of this incredible community from all over the world to solve these incredible problems together. I truly believe building the future of open societies, this is a core group of people that are actually at the forefront of that. So I cannot wait to work alongside each and every one of you as we build the foundations of the next era of humanity. And lastly, of course, for those that share this vision and are building within the space, the Hansa team has its doors wide open. So come check our website, www.hansa.network. Follow us on our Twitters, Hansa_network. If you want to follow me, Louis_Dharma. If you're building anything in the space, if you're doing anything novel like that, if you need funding support, if you need strategic or advisory support, we're always welcoming you with open arms. So that's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you for your time and thank you for your speech. So next, here will be the last guest speech from Bollet Crypto, and his name is Bobby. So Bobby, are you ready to give us your speech?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
So let me share my background. I hope all of you can hear me. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Bitcoin from the perspective of ownership and custody. Okay, this is a topic that's near and dear my heart. So who owns Bitcoin? This is one of the most important questions and one of the very popular questions people ask. For example, at a speech, at a conference, who owns Bitcoin? If this were a live event, many of you would raise your hand. But another way to think about it is who truly owns their Bitcoin, right? It's not just a matter of owning Bitcoin as an asset, but who actually takes ownership as opposed to having it stored somewhere else. What is ownership? This is a topic where it's a very simple topic. Very few people talk about it, but it's very, very critical in the age of digital currencies and online transactions. Here's why. So in terms of ownership, money started with physical ownership. I'm talking about physical goods, whether it's coins and gemstones, whether it's jewelry, commodities, rice, grain. Historically, value is in the physical good itself. Okay, and today, money is mostly entitled ownership. Okay, this is a big contrast to the historical situation. And what is title ownership? Well, it's really about money and fiat money and accounts being tied to your identity. So these days, ownership is no longer about holding something in your hands, but rather it's about your money in bank accounts, whether it's online payment systems like WeChat, Alipay, Venmo, PayPal, or banks, stock brokerage accounts. Everything is titled to your name, even real estate, even cars, automobiles are all titled to your name. So with fiat money, what are the problem and risks? So for example, fiat money, the most important thing that happened this past year is the run on the banks. So is your money actually in the bank? With a fiat money system in title ownership, the money you have in the bank is actually not in there because the whole system is built on the fact that the money is being lent out to other borrowers. That's how the fiat system works. By definition, your assets is someone else's liability. So this is a scary concept that hopefully does not cross over into cryptocurrency. And number two is, can you get your money out, right? So for example, earlier this year with the run of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank in the United States, a lot of people went to their branches, ATMs, and try to get their money out. There were long lines queuing. And this is no different than about 10 years ago when the first banking crisis in Cyprus happened, when the state bank collapsed and people were trying to get their money out of the Bank of Cyprus. So can you get your money out on time? So the issue with title ownership is when identity is involved. So when you have an account, a bank account or a stock brokerage account, or even owning real estate, you actually don't have control over the actual asset because someone else is a judge and someone else has control. And this is a concept that it's simple concept, but people don't think enough about it. Okay. So what about cash? Do you control your cash? So people think, oh, with cash, at least I control it. Yes and no. Yes, it's cash, you control it. But what you don't control is the value of the cash. Because if you think about cash, what's important is the value of it. So if the value goes out the window, such as in inflation, hyperinflation, then it's really not worth anything. And we have 4 examples, very famous examples. We have the Deutschmark, the pre-World War Deutschmark, Germany. We have the Zimbabwe dollars, on the bottom left, 100 billion Zimbabwe dollars through hyperinflation is not much at all. We have Venezuela, the Bolivar went through hyperinflation just in recent decades. And then, of course, in India, they can arbitrarily ban the rupees. This happened about 10 years ago, banning the 500 to 1,000 rupee notes. So even if you have the paper notes, the government can arbitrarily take the money away, take the value away, and you don't have any money, so to speak. So therefore, controlling Bitcoin, controlling your custody of Bitcoin is super important. And the real question is, how do you control, how do you have your Bitcoin, right? So owning it, merely saying that you own Bitcoin is really not enough. It would be really more important for you to have control over it. So let's talk about how most people own their Bitcoin. Most people have their Bitcoins on exchanges, and we know exchange platforms can get hacked. That happens routinely. More importantly, here's the second thing, which is your exchange account. The account that you have on exchange can get hacked. Now, this is distinctly different than the exchange getting hacked, but rather your specific account might get phished, might get hacked, and people can steal money from your account as opposed to stealing money from the broader exchange itself. So this is a very important risk factor to be aware of. And third, the platforms itself, even if they're not hacked, they can go insolvent due to mismanagement and all that. And we're seeing, very clearly through the trials of SBF and FTX in the recent weeks, okay, about how they mismanaged the funds and became insolvent. All right, so the critical lesson here is, with digital currency, you can do this, which is to finally self-custody your assets, to finally self-custody your Bitcoin, okay? Again, this lesson is simple, but what's hard is for people to actually follow through. I think if you ask people in general, they all know this, but it's very, very difficult for everyone to follow through. There are many ways to store your Bitcoin, to store your digital assets, okay? And here are examples of very common ways: custodial platforms versus self-custody. So first of all, the big separation is, do you store it yourself or do you store it on a platform? And then, of course, we advocate for self-custody. And if you self-custody it on a wallet, then there's a notion of hot wallets versus cold storage. Hot wallets are things that store your coins on a device, whether it's a mobile phone or computer where it's running. The keys are on the device itself, and the device can be connected to the internet. Whereas cold storage, the private keys are offline on a different device, and that is not connected to the internet, and that's why they call it cold storage. And of course, what we advocate for is for you to self-custody your Bitcoin and digital crypto, and for you to use cold storage. So here's an example of a very popular and typical use case to use cold storage self-custody. But is it that simple, right? So the question is does this picture encapsulate the whole situation? And if you zoom out a little bit, you realize it's not necessarily the case, because complexity is the enemy of safety. Is your crypto cold storage solution simple enough to use safely? So now let's zoom out. What does it look like? Well, in reality, the simple device is not the full picture. You have cables, you have power sources, you're connecting to computers, you may have firmware updates, you may have mini programs running on your device. You definitely will have recovery seeds, recovery words written on pieces of paper, 2 or 3 copies, and it's poor handwriting. You might write it wrong. You might write the words out of order. And where do you store these recovery words, right? So what appeared to be a very simple and secure device turns out the full solution is anything but simple and secure. Okay, so this is where a complexity causes failure. Okay, so for the most part, I don't recommend this solution for the vast majority of people. There are people who can get this done well, but for most people, this is not the suitable approach, in my opinion. So what is a solution? The solution is to find a safe and easy cold storage, something to the level where you can use safely with your technical know-how. And with Ballet, this is my company, what we make is the cold storage card. And this card is super easy. The reason is that comes in a display case. The reason is that it has zero setup. Okay, this card is ready to go. It's a physical card, has no electronic components. So there's no updates required, no firmware updates, and it's all metal. And there's zero parts. It's really designed for 20 years. It's probably the only cold storage device that's designed for 20 years, where if you put cryptocurrency on there, Bitcoin on there, in 20 years, you can be assured to have access to it and not be stuck in rotting technology and so on and so forth. Okay, and it becomes a bearer asset, where it allows you to take digital cryptocurrency and turn it into bearer asset so that you could use it anywhere and give it to people. We also offer an app ecosystem. So the Ballet Crypto app is a companion app that allows you to use your device, monitor, track the balances in real time. So you can store the card away safely in a safe deposit box or a bank vault, and then you can access and see the balance and add to it anytime you want. It has multi-currency support, NFTs, over 1,000 different kinds of coins and NFTs. And it also offers secure air-gapped signing in case you really want to take it to the extreme and not even trust the device that you load the card on. Okay, so with Ballet, we finally have a solution that is safe and easy cold storage, allows for self-custody for everyone. Okay, so the real lesson is avoid the mess. Okay, when people think about cold storage, think about self-custody, and they think of these solutions, these physical small devices that are electronic and have backup and recovery phrases, that's all good if you know how to use it. But however, when you misuse it or don't know how to use it, it creates a whole mess, and actually it actually causes people to lose coins. And this is the real thing to avoid. Okay, so want true safety, keep it simple, right? KISS, keep it simple. Self-custody cold storage, physical bearer asset, durable and long-lasting, no electronics, no cables, no firmware updates, and all in the name of preventing user mistakes. And that's what Ballet is about. All right, so Bitcoin is the future of money. And what's unique about this future of money is that you can actually self-custody it. And obviously, we preach it in this age of Bitcoin. It's coming back above $30,000 for the first time in many, many months. I'm personally very excited to see this slow rally picking up. So in light of that, always remember to self-custody your Bitcoin. I'm also the author of this book, The Promise of Bitcoin. You can get this on Amazon in physical hard copy, as well as in ebook and also audiobook. So I also recorded the audiobook narration of this book called The Promise of Bitcoin. It's been very popular in the last 2 years. It's a Wall Street Journal national bestseller, I think, for 2 weeks in a row. So it's been great. Okay, thank you very much. I'm the founder and CEO of Ballet. Please add us on X, Twitter, and Instagram, and so on and so forth. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for your excellent speech for us. And I think next we will come to our panel stage. So the first panel will be hosted by Stacks and Bobby, Sankar Banerjee, and several OGs will be the guest. Okay, so let us just have a 3-minute break, and we can go on. Okay.